Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Just by her presence here, I feel healthier, just like that. She is back. So excited to have the Eat Well Guru joining us today, and that's Dr. Maryam Dadkhah. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. By the way, let's tell everybody your website is eatwellguru.com. You are a registered dietitian, nutritionist. You always have some great ideas and great tips to keep us healthy. And I mean, it's not easy. We like to eat. We know we should be eating better. And a lot of times we just don't know what to do and how to handle that. Can we focus on salt and sodium for a couple of minutes today?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. There was a study that came out recently that said if you want to cut back on sodium and salt intake, that you can replace it with Chipotle. And they did research on a bunch of different people, and everybody said, the majority of people said that, that satisfies me just as good as salt does. So now that's cutting down on your sodium intake. I have to try that. I don't normally just, sprinkle Chipotle on what I eat. But then again, I haven't used salt in decades. Listen, I'm not super healthy, but I will say that, the salt thing passed me by long ago because everything does contain salt. Why do we have this fixation with salt? Why do people love it so much?
Well, it's a matter of taste. And that's a good point. Many people think that they don't add salt to their food. Most of our problem is not coming from adding salt to food. Most of our problem is coming from eating out or having processed food.
Gotcha. And it makes perfect sense. If you go to a fast food restaurant loaded with sodium, and my dad always used to say that's how they get you back, because you're like, oh, I'm craving salt. I need to have, salty fries.
Right. And actually, there was a really nice book that it discusses that it can have addictive effect if we mix salt and sugar and fat. So basically, when they combine all three, people want more. A good example of it is chips. If you start eating chips, you can never finish just by one or two. You want to get more and more and more. So it's a good example of how it basically gets you fixated, like your dad said.
How interesting, because if you look at the ingredients on most chips, sugar is included in there.
True. Plus that chips is mostly carbs. So when we say sugar, we alternate between using sugar and carbs.
Interesting point. I'll tell you straight out, hey, I love French fries like anybody else. I'll always order no salt on them. And sometimes you have to move your car over to the side and you have to wait for them to cook it. But two things, it's fresh. I know that. And guess what? There's going to be sodium and salt on them anyway, because in the hopper, when they pull them out, they can't just eliminate that. It's just going to be less of the sprinkling of the salt on there. And I'm fine with it. I taste potato. I want to taste potato and not salt.
So most people don't do it. So that's great that you do it. You're cutting it by a whole lot. One thing that I can tell you, though, whenever you're eating out, many times just one meal is more than the whole day recommendation of sodium and salt.
So let me make sure I got that right. That one meal could be your quota for the entire day.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So what's an acceptable salt intake for one day for an adult?
So the general recommendation for publics is like 2,300 milligrams of sodium.
Okay. And if I go by memory, if you have a frozen dinner, you throw it in the microwave, right? It's got at least 500 milligrams, maybe 6, somewhere in there.
You're very right. Though there is a catch. On the food labels, it's not based on 2,300 milligrams. It's based on 2,400 milligrams of sodium. Another catch is sometimes some of those frozen meals might be more than one meal or one serving size. So what you see on that nutrition facts might not apply to the whole package, especially if the package is more than one serving.
So what you're saying is, Maryam, is that you need to look at the label very closely to see if it's 2 servings.
Exactly, or more.
Oh, so that means that one frozen dinner could be more like over 1,000 milligrams of sodium if it's 2 servings.
Correct.
Wow. We're getting instant feedback. You can always reach us at instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com.
Mhm.
And this one comes from Kelly, who is in Dallas. And she says, is sea salt any better than regular salt? I guess she means, is it any healthier?
Right. By a little, not a whole lot. So it doesn't make that much of a difference. So being Himalayan salt or sea salt, they might have a little bit of different minerals in them, but it's so small and so little that doesn't make that much of a difference. So down the road, you're still getting sodium and this much of sodium.
Okay.
One other thing that I need to add is the problem is not always salt, it's added sodium. Sodium is a naturally occurring nutrient in the food. It becomes a problem when we are adding it to the products. And why I'm saying it's not always salt, because we have MSG, is majority of it is sodium. We have baking soda, baking powder, majority of it is sodium. And there are so many other additives and preservatives that again is sodium. So we basically worried about added sodium, not specifically salt.
Interesting. And I didn't even know baking soda, baking powder, that they contain those amounts of sodium that could be challenging if you're trying to cut back. So to me, what you just said in terms of the sea salt, answering Kelly's question, is that sea salt it's just a marketing tactic.
Exactly.
Wow. So the perception is, oh, healthier. Sea salt comes from the sea. It's got to be better than regular salt.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for the most part. Some different minerals.
Right.
That's about it.
But you know what? Let's get back to the first question that you asked me. That was a great point about that study, the chipotle instead of salt.
Yeah. Use chipotle as a
Right.
substitute to satisfy you instead of salt.
Exactly. So there's many spices and herbs that we can replace them for salt. We can also use lemon juice and vinegar and things like that they don't have added salt as a taste, flavor enhancing agents. There is also something we have to pay attention though. So we do have many products that they might not advertise it as a salt, but again, salt is the first ingredient when we look at these spices and herbs. So
Salt is the first
again,
ingredient, yes.
right. So an example is, I told one of my patients is, yeah, we are going to cut back sodium and salt and don't add it to the foods. She said, oh, I'm good. I do lemon pepper. The first ingredient with lemon pepper is salt. So many times, if we don't check the labels and ingredients, we're still getting the same amount of sodium and salt, not knowing that's what we are getting.
Wow. Even if it's a second or third ingredient, it's a lot.
The second matters. They usually say the first two is the main one, but you're right. Still, if you add it to everything that you're getting throughout the day, it might add a lot to your diet.
So let me ask you a question. I went to a place to pick up some coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to name the place,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm looking in the cabinet and there's some paninis, and I grabbed one and had that for lunch. How do you know what you're eating is healthy? How do you make those healthy choice decisions? I think a lot of us are faced with that, because I'm reading the backs of the other sandwiches in there, and I'm like, all right, well, this one has less calories. This one, and I know I shouldn't just go by calories because it was only like maybe 75 or 100 difference. I'm going by the protein level because I want to eat and have a lot of protein to keep me going later in the day. But how do you make those choices? There you are. You're in the the refrigerated section somewhere, and you're trying to decide what's the best way to decide what to look for, what not to.
Right. So I always start with serving size and then serving per container. So then, depending on if I want to maintain the weight or want to lose the weight, the calorie matters. So let's say if I want to lose weight, I probably would shoot for something that has a less calorie. But make sure that that's calorie is for the serving, not for the whole thing. Then the next level that I'm going to look at, there are nutrients on the food labels that I want to get most of it. There are nutrients on the food labels that I want to get the least amount of it. So let's say things like saturated fat, I want to get the least amount of it. Sodium, I want to get the least amount of it. The added sugar, I want to get the least amount of it. Whereas you said protein. So if I feel like that I'm not getting enough protein, or I'm vegan and vegetarian, that's one area that I would pay attention to. Fiber is another good one. I make sure that I get about 3 grams plus as much as fiber I can get in a food component. Again, it depends on where you're coming from. So let's say if you have diabetes and if you need to manage your carbs, that's another area that you might pay attention to. Make sure that you get, you are covering that carbs that you're getting if you need insulin, or if you have medications, or if you are on any, so it depends on what we have in mind and what we want to achieve. If it's general public, so paying attention to these nutrients that needs to be higher, these nutrients that needs to be lower, is probably where we go for. The ones that needs to be higher, we usually look for around 20% or more on daily value. The ones that we want to keep it to the minimum, we need to look at for something about 5% or less. So sodium, saturated fat, added sugar, things like that, we want it to be around 5% of that daily value.
Got it. By the way, we're talking with Dr. Maryam Dadkhah, who is a registered dietitian and a nutritionist, and she's with Eatwellguru.com. So my next question is dairy. Is dairy bad for you? How much is too much?
So it depends on who we're listening to.
This is very true, because somebody told me I eat too much dairy, and that's where this came up from.
Right. So it depends on who we are listening to. So that's very interesting. So I'm trying to look at these guidelines. There is the footprint calculator that Harvard School of Public Health have on their website, that I took that test last night. I don't do that much of meat. I do some fish and seafood. My chicken and red meat is very limited. Most dairy that I do is cheese, not so much of milk or yogurt. So I took the test, and they told me that I'm doing too much of cheese. So if you look at the planet and health of the planet, we probably need to limit as much as we can the animal protein. And apparently dairy is a big deal when it comes to the health of the planet. As far as our health, there are some issues with the dairy. So the cheese, for example, have 2 big problems. It has a lot of sodium, a lot of saturated fat. Unless you go to those ones that is very light and fat-free, and even with those ones, sometimes they're so close to the regular one that doesn't make sense to go that way. Other problems with the dairy products is they have growth hormone that can cause our bones to grow pretty fast at an earlier age, but that also can cause osteoporosis later in the life. Plus, one thing that we know, even though in the US population, we have a lot of calcium intake because of the dairy, we have more osteoporosis compared to other parts of the world that they might have much less calcium intake, but it's from plant-based items.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that we're, I mean, I'm not surprised that we're getting, a lot of calcium because we eat a lot of dairy, but didn't realize, you would think that would be good. Hey, you're getting your calcium, but they can have opposite effects.
Right. But one thing that we saw at the same time, because of the type of the protein that they have, we also lose more calcium in our urine. So wow. It's complicated. So the Harvard people, they recommend keep your dairy to, let's say, 1, max 2. The dietary guidelines, which have a dairy council effect on it after they looked at the studies, they said, hey, 2 to 3. I would like to side with more science kind of stuff, and I would like to say 1 to 2 max. It's probably good, not go beyond that on a daily basis, and keep it to fat-free, maybe 1%. Limit the cheese, as the footprint calculator told me yesterday, because of all those things. So that's my recommendation.
Well, I appreciate your transparency and your honesty. I mean, there you are. This is what you do. This is your life, and you got caught, so to speak. Having too much calcium is a little bit of a surprise. I got caught on that, and somebody brought it to my attention because in the morning I would have maybe some Greek yogurt. low fat, a lot of protein. Would think, all right, we're good with that. And then I might have a protein drink during the day, mix the powder
Mhm.
up. Didn't realize that it was whey protein,
Mhm.
also known as dairy. So then
Yeah, that's true.
oh, let me grab a snack. Here's a cheese stick, low fat. This is, 80 calories. I'm getting, 6 grams of protein, little, pick me up during the day, add a little
Mhm.
peanut butter to it. But definitely eating too much dairy in one day. Didn't even realize it.
Yes, yes. It's very easy to get stuck with something like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
And I'm sure that's something that you help people with in terms of, I almost don't want to say these two words, but meal plan. That's almost
Mhm.
like, oh, a lot of work. I gotta plan my meals. But I know that you come up with solutions to make it easy for people based on what they like to eat, right?
I do. And here's what I do. Some people want me to give them something written, what I think is perfect. I usually hesitate to do that. I've seen so many times when I overwhelm people with giving something written, which has no basically connection to what exactly they do on a regular basis, the chances of them being able to do it is almost zero. Or they might do it for a month, a week, then they start not doing it. What I try to do is try to basically tweak things little by little, gradually. So let's say after a while, when they work with me, they get everything straight. They know why they're doing that. They have the reason for that. And they have the skills and tools to make that happen.
I love your approach to that because what you just said was spot on. I know somebody who is a fitness guy. He's also pretty versed in nutrition, and he made a suggestion based on the things I like to eat. And it lasted maybe like 3 weeks, and then you just bail from it. And it's because, and not that I didn't want to, sometimes it can be a lot of work. And also, fortunately, it was things that I like to eat, but you don't want
Mhm.
somebody saying to you, hey, you're going to eat seafood. I really don't eat a lot of seafood. And
Right.
you're going to derail right away because that's not, that's not one of your likes.
Exactly. So I would rather to teach people fishing rather than give them the fish.
I have a friend that says the same exact thing. And she's a fitness instructor. I love that. So how about some other tips? Now we talked about sodium, salt, we talked about sugar. Any other tips that you can offer to help somebody eat a little bit better?
So another one that we talked about on the food label is added sugar. That's a great area to also look at. So we don't have the best guideline that we have both for sodium and for sugar is actually coming from American Heart Association. So for sodium, they actually reduce the sodium. It's 1,500 compared to that 2,300 that I told you. That is harder. For the sugar, they also have recommendations, but the recommendation that they have is different for men and women. So they said, keep your added sugar under 25 for women and under 36 for men.
And that's per day.
That's per day, and that's added sugar. So many times people ask me, what about fruits? The fruits are not added sugar. They are naturally occurring sugar. But when we are talking about added sugar, even honey and fruit juice and fruit concentrate and maple syrup and agave nectar and then brown sugar and then the cane syrup, this nectar, that syrup, they all count towards that added sugar. And the reason is they are half glucose, half fructose, and no other nutrients. Whereas something like fruits, we might have fructose and glucose in it, but they come, it's such a big package of other health food nutrients that we won't consider them added sugar. And we recommend people to have them on a daily basis. But with these added sugar, we want people to limit them to these numbers as much as possible because of their health consequences.
Interesting. What about sugar alcohols? I've seen that usually when it's I guess low fat, lower sugar products. Sugar alcohols bad for you? What are they?
Great question, Steve. So we categorize all of them in low calorie sweetener. all of those, being stevia, being aspartame, being saccharin, being sugar alcohol, they're very similar. They are way more sweeter than regular table sugar or all these other ones that I told you, and they have very low calorie comparatively. But what we know, let's say in a long period of times, the people that switch from regular ones to these ones, we expect them not getting the calories as much or not getting the calories. We see actually the weight is higher. Whether they intentionally compensate and get more calories some other places, whether their brain want them to get more sweeter stuff because these items are sweeter, we don't know, or maybe even change their bacteria in their gut. So we don't know exactly what is the mechanism that it causes it to happen, but we don't see the effects that we expect them to do to help people to lose the weight or not gain weight over a long period of time. So many times what I recommend people is, hey, reduce how much sugar you're doing instead of going to these ones. Or if you want to use these, we call them transitionary products. So you can use them for a short period of time, but eventually, hey, the water is your best bet, or not having, or fruits are your best bet, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I got hooked on years ago, seltzer water. And love it. I feel satisfied. I feel like I'm drinking something that's filling because it's bubbly. It feels like soda. There's no calories in it, and it's usually just an essence of lemon or whatever in there. So
exactly.
You just brought up, we started talking about artificial sweeteners, and are there any better ones, or are they all kind of in the same category? You know, we didn't mention aspartame. That's another one. Is it anything?
Not really. From the long period of the epidemiological studies that they've done, we don't see any benefit for one over the other ones.
Wow.
Another problem is someone needs to pay for these research to be done. And the producer, if they want to pay for something, they don't want to say these are bad in a long period of time. So we don't have that much of evidence, but the evidence that we have from these other studies doesn't show that one is better than the others. One thing that I've seen that is used to advertise for them is that they are from nature. Hey, we have poison from nature. Just because something is from nature doesn't make it healthier. We still need to look at their profile, their effects, and so forth.
So true. Well, there you go. Sugar alcohols. You think alcohol, that's from nature. It's fermented. It's got, how bad could it be? You know, and sugar alcohol, sweet alcohol, that's got to be okay for you. Based on what you just said in terms of studies, they've done research on people drinking diet soda. And it actually stimulates your appetite and makes you hungrier. Have you heard that?
Exactly. Yes, that's so true. So that's why I'm saying we don't know exactly what the mechanism is. We suspect that could be one. So there are a few things that we think that they are mechanism behind them causing more weight gain over a long period of time. But exactly which one it is needs more studies and things like that. And we learn, hey, just imagine the case of COVID. How much we learn from the beginning, and as science changes, the same case for anything else. So we learn something, and then we see more studies and more evidence, and we get better understanding of how it works.
Interesting analogy, because my perception, of course, the COVID thing, we're always learning. When it comes to artificial sweeteners, they've been here for how long? And you would think that all this research has been done. It's definitive. We're finished, and now we're moving on to something else. But to your point, costs money, and I got a couple of bucks in my wallet. That's not going to cover it.
Exactly. That's true.
But I'd love to know. Let's tell everybody how you can help them. They go to your website, eatwellguru.com. And what happens from there? You have a discovery call. Is it free? Tell us more.
So when people get to my website, they can either email me or call me. They leave me a message, or they email me and tell me what they want. Then I call them back. And we might have a couple minutes discussion of if I can help them or I cannot help them and what's the next step should be. And then I set up an appointment for them. I see patients in person or virtual these days. And then that's how we start and see how it goes. And then we decide how frequently we want to see each other and so forth. I take most of the or majority of the insurances in this area, so that is helping with so many people to keep up with their visits.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because I was unaware, or sometimes I forget too, that insurance can cover a nutritionist or a dietitian.
Yes, so in state of Virginia, we do have coverage from some of the insurances that they would help people to get that help, that support.
So if it's somebody around the country somewhere is watching and listening, then they could check with their insurance company and find out if it covers.
Right, I do have people from around the country and even around the world. I do have a few people from Africa and other, I have people from Kentucky and Idaho and Texas and California and New York. So yes, I do see patients from around the country and sometimes from other countries.
That's fantastic, Maryam. And you know what? That's a sign of a true pro, because we know what we eat here in the States. Now you're dealing with somebody in, let's say, Africa, South Africa, wherever.
Exactly.
Everything is different, and you can
So
tailor
true.
something and help them. Wow.
Yes, yes.
But we're all humans, and we should be having a certain amount of sodium and not too much.
There you go.
Skip the chips today. Skip the chips.
Yes.
Dr. Maryam Dadkhah, always great talking with you. Love the insight, the information. Love your honesty too about everything. Go to eatwellguru.com and get on a better path for life. Change it up a little bit. Learn what you're eating. I think that's the key. You know, you teach. How did that go again? You teach how to fish. You don't just hand them the fish.
Exactly.
Right. I don't eat fish, so well, you know, a steak or something like that. But
That's true.
always great talking with you. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Thank you. And eat well, everybody. And we'll be right back.
Bye-bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.